All right, so before we get started, I want to start off by just going over an example. So to prepare for this meeting, we were thinking about recent events that we could show an example of. And one of the stories that came up was the recent backlog of passports being renewed or generated, and it was something like 1.4 million in the backlog. And so we wanted to create somewhat of an example to show how someone with StudioX could automate their work if that was part of their job to renew or generate a passport. So with this, before I jump into StudioX, let me go over StudioX, and then before I start the process, I'll show you what we're going to do. So this is StudioX, and I have it opened up. On the right-hand side, you can see there's some templates that if this met your application, you could click on that and use that as kind of a kickstart to your automation, or if it's something that's specific to your needs, then you can create a blank task and start from there. Here we'll give this a name. Let's call it passport demo. And while that's starting up, I'll walk through kind of what we're going to do so that we can see. So first, what I've done before this meeting is I sent an email to replicate if this was my job where someone was sending in data with the passport. Right? So if this came into my inbox, then someone would send me a note. Here's my data. Please hope to renew my passport, whatever it may be. And there's an attachment in there. And if you can imagine, hundreds or thousands of these coming in on a weekly basis, then you would have to manually process those. So once you download and open the file, this is the example that I created. Then you need to go through, and for each row, you need to go and enter that data into someone. For this example, we're going to use the automation test site, and we'll take that data from the Excel file and we'll put it in each of the fields, and we'll go through. So we'll build it out that way. All right. So with that being said, then we can start in StudioX. So the first thing is in the main section, this is where you'll build out your automation. On the left-hand side are your activities, so the different components that you'll need to develop your automation. And these are just tabs to help you navigate some of the popular applications. So for this application, the scenario that we created here is that data is going to be sent in to someone's inbox. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Outlook. I'm going to drag that over. And it already comes pre-configured, and so this one says use default email account. So that's for the email account on my machine. So that's what I will use. And then after that, what I want to say is we're going to look for each email. So as the bot's going through, it's going to look through all of the emails, and it can pull them all in or to meet a specific criteria. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add in my inbox. All right. And then I'll say with attachments only. And for additional filters, I'm going to say the subject line, and it contains something to do with passport. So I could type that in, or I could put it to ask when run. All right. So if the requirements change a little bit, I can enter that in. All right. So after we have that, then we need to save. We need to save that email attachment. So from the component list on the left-hand side, I'll drag and drop that over. We don't need a filter. And for this one, I just want to save it on the desktop. Okay. All right. So first, before we go any further, now I have it attaching to my email. I have it going through my email, filtering out for attachments and subject line of attachment, and then I have it saving those attachments to my desktop. So let's hit the debug button and see if that works. Okay, this is where it's asking, and so we'll put in the parameters to look for in the subject line. Okay, so it says last run successful. And when I look on my desktop now, I do see it. So it went through all of my email and downloaded the Excel file that met the criteria. So now that we have that, we want to tell it to open up this website application where we need to enter the data. So do that. We can close that out, and I will grab the URL. Okay, and here I need to tell it to attach to an application, or in this case, a browser. here, I shouldn't have closed that. Oh, great. So this is telling me to indicate which application I want to work with. So I just click on it, and now it will attach to Chrome, and it already has my URL in there. So from there, once we have that open, then we know that we need to start going through that Excel sheet, and for each row, we need to get that data and put it into the site. So for that part, I will go to Excel, and we need to attach to Excel, and we need to tell it which file to work with. So here, I'll go to my desktop, I'll say passport data, auto save, create, okay. Next part is I'm going to look for Excel for each row. Okay, so this part, I'm going to tell it for every row that's in that Excel file, we need to do some work. So here, I'll drag that in. All right, current row in range. Click on the plus sign. And sheet 1. Sheet 1 is the tab name within that file. And I'm going to click on has headers because it has names in it. Okay. So now after we have this, we will have the data, and then we want to start putting that data into the site. So the same way a user would type into the website, that's what I'm going to select here, type into, and I'm going to tell it where to type into. So I'm going to click on the field, and as it's identifying it, not only is it identifying the field to type into, but it's also identifying what's called an anchor. So anytime it goes to that site, it would look for first name and then that field. So it makes it more stable. And you'll see here, so if I put type into, then when I click on the plus sign, it's already going into the current row of Excel. And since we have, the Excel add-on within StudioX, it doesn't have to have Excel open. It can read it in the background. And if I go to current row, I can click on first name. So it's reading that out of the Excel sheet without us opening it. All right. So the next thing, I'll do another one. For this example, I'm just going to put in first name, last name, and phone number. So here I'll do another type into. Same thing, I'll indicate now last name, and it'll create that anchor as well. And here I'll do the same thing, current row, and I'll choose last name. Okay, and then one last one, and then indicate on screen, and I'll just confirm that's correct. All right. All right, and just so that once the user runs this, just a good way to know that everything is done as expected and it's completed, we'll put a message box in there. And select text, and I'll say all data items were entered successfully. Okay, and I'm going to move this into the browser loop because after that, I want it to close the browser. Do that. Close. Right. So there I'll say navigate browser, and then searching. I'm just searching the same thing as if I was doing it manually. So I type in close, and it comes up with the navigate browser, and then I can choose my option. Okay, so we should be good to go now. I will close that, and we'll run it and see if everything works. Again, this is asking for the subject line to look in the email. All right. And my hands are off the keyboard. This is all of the bot going. Okay. Excellent. All data items were entered successfully. Good. And it closed the browser tab, and now we're done. So that part is done. Now let me save this and close it. Yeah. Let me close it because I want to open it up now and show it in Studio. So that was StudioX, and that's just showing how you can build it with no coding, very little typing. You didn't see me type very much at all. Here it is in StudioX, and you can see the X on the left-hand side there. And to switch over to Studio, if I go to Settings, the License and Profiles, here I can choose StudioX or Studio. And now that I chose Studio, it's just reconfiguring, and we'll open it up. And here we'll see Passport Demo, and we can see the X. So that shows us that it was built in StudioX, and we can open it up in Studio. Okay, so you can see it looks a little bit different, but it still has most of your actions, your activities on the left, your main workflows in the middle. Okay, so this is how it converts it from StudioX to Studio. Now, if I wanted to, I could go through and I could edit things. So, for example, if this was going to run on a VM or something of that nature, or on as an attended box, we could change some of this stuff, like default account email. We could change that to dynamic selectors. The part where it's asking about the subject line, again, we can make that dynamic instead of user input. So there's a lot of things that we can do with this. And then if we wanted to, we could publish it. That way it could be ran from the orchestrator. But for this, what I want to do is I want to close this down, and I want to show you quickly the difference. So you see it in StudioX, and you see it now in Studio. But I want to show you the differences if we were to build this in Studio. Now I close that down, and I'm going to open up Studio, and I'm going to start off with a blank slate because there's some key differences here that we'll go over. So I'm going to start with a blank process, and we'll call this Passport Demo Pro. So the first thing here is I'm going to put in what's called a flowchart. And this is one of the biggest differences. Is StudioX is very linear, meaning I get my Excel file, I go through each row and I put it into some application. So whatever it may be, right? Very linear. But within Studio, you can make it much more dynamic, and you can add different decision points. You can add different loops, exception handling, things of that nature, which will handle many more scenarios than just what I make based on my local machine. All right, so here I'm adding a sequence. So here I'm just going to build out something very similar to what we just did, but I'm going to do it in Studio just so that you can see the differences. So here I'm going to call the first sequence select data, and the second one will be enter data. Enter data. All right, so I'm going to go into this sequence. And for time's sake, I'm not going to set up the email application since we've already downloaded the file. So here, what I'm going to do is I'll just start off with the Excel file. So if I go down to app integration, I can look for Excel, and here basically I'm going to attach to Excel and tell it to work with a specific notebook. All right. So we've attached to the Excel file. Now what we want to do is we want to read that data into what UiPath Studio calls a data table. So I'm going to say read range, sheet 1. Let me just make sure that it's sheet 1. Yes. Okay. Sheet 1, and I'll leave this blank. If I leave it blank, it'll pull in the entire contents of the file of that tab. And the other thing that I like to do is just so that I can visually see it when I'm testing things out, I like to add in a write line so that I can see it. So first, I'll do an output data table. And I just remembered, I forgot something here. So, all right, once it pulls in that read range from Excel, I need to create a variable for it to store that information into. So here, I'll just name it file. I'll name it file data. Once I did that, go down to the variables, and I see it is a data table, and I'm going to change that scope so that it can be read from the main flowchart. All right, and here I'll name that file data, and now I need to create a string for this. So I'll name it file data string, and now I want to do a write line so that I can see it in the output. File data string. Okay, so here let me do a breakpoint, and again under debug, I can run it very slow to see how it interacts, or I can run it at a faster speed. So this one I'm doing 4 times the speed, and I'm going to hit play to see if everything's working as we expect. There's the output of the file. Out for this, I'm going to do step over. Okay, excellent. On the left-hand side, you can see it brought in first name, last name, phone. Okay, excellent. So that looks to be doing exactly what we want to. All right. So now that we've collected the data, now we need to enter the data. Okay. So the first thing we want to do here, we need to open that browser. Open browser. Write this in, and let me get the URL. And here, so in Studio, we need to do things like double quotes and things like that that we do not do in StudioX. So now that I have, so this part will open and attach to the browser, and I'll add a delay just to give it a second to open. And a real bot for that would go into production, we would make this dynamic. We would not put a static delay in there, but we'll give it 2 seconds. But this is just for the demo. All right. So now that we have that, and if you remember, we brought in the Excel file and brought it into a data table. So now we need to iterate through that. So I'm going to say for each row, and then the name of our data table, so file data. Okay. So now that we have that, it's going to go through each one of those, and now we need to have it type into that website. Okay. Okay, so we need to identify it. So very similar to what we did in Studio here, I'm going to use a type into. Okay, indicate on browser. Okay. We see that, and there are selectors. When we validate it, it doesn't like that. So what we can do also, which is another proprietary thing to UiPath, is the UI Explorer. So we can open this up. And this will give us a another selector that is more stable that we can work with. Okay, and X must be quoted. So here, for this, I need to type it out. So first name, and then we need to convert that to a string. So dot to string. All right, and since we're getting close to time, I'm not going to do all the fields. I'm just going to do the first so that you can see it. And then I'll do it just like before, message box. Okay. All right. So that now that we have all of that, I'll close this down. close the Excel file, and run it. And this way, and for this one, well, we'll run it. So we should see the interactions will be very similar to what we saw before, just the overall building process is different. And I put a breakpoint there. Okay. But Schwinn, I know we're close to time. So
well, John, obviously, I think the audience can certainly see the difference between StudioX and Studio. So thank you again for the demo.